Hi there, Martha Masharia here. I pray that you are well. God has been faithful to me. I thank God every day. I'm telling you, I absolutely do. When I think of where He has brought me from, with God, all things are possible. So, first and foremost, I want to tell you a little bit about me before I start talking about this. I am married. I have been married for 16 years. I have two children. Husband, I have two children, as a daughter and a son. And we are absolutely happy in our marriage. We thank God for what He has done for us and how He continues to provide for us and help us even in this journey as we walk together as husband and wife and with our two children. So anyway, I want to talk about, at least what I'm going to talk about today is rebuilding. You know, many times things are broken, things are going downhill. Sometimes things look like they are dead, never to resurrect. But I want to talk about rebuilding. And I'll talk about it from the book of Nehemiah. If there is a one word, I mean, I'd use many words for the book of Nehemiah, but if there is one of the words I'd use from the book of Nehemiah is the word rebuilding. Rebuilding something is never easy. It is never easy to rebuild something. It is actually easier to build than to rebuild. I remember one day I was talking to a pastor's wife who her and her husband had taken over a church that had been broken and had lost a pastor. The pastor had to resign, and his wife told me after several years that it is actually easier, it would have been easier for them to build their ministry from the ground up and than trying to rebuild a church that had already been broken. So rebuilding is not easy. In the case of Nehemiah, when from the book of Nehemiah, he was going to Jerusalem to supervise the rebuilding of the wall. Now, there's a whole background to that of how the children of Israel in the book of Ezra had to go back, or some of them went back. Not everybody did, but some of them went back to rebuild the temple. So Nehemiah is going to go, or rather went to rebuild, to help in rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem. Okay, the wall. So later I'll encourage you with teaching on how he overcame his challenges in another video. I just can't do that here. It's not possible. There's a lot in the book of Nehemiah, and if I do that, I'll be rushing through it, and it really will not help you as much. So I will talk about rebuilding, what is needed when it comes to rebuilding. That's what it is about. That's what I'm going to talk about. What is needed when it comes to rebuilding? Number one, rebuilding starts with a burden. Nehemiah chapter 1 verse 1 to 4 reads, "Now it happened in the month of Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Susa, the citadel, that Hanani, or however you want to pronounce that, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews who escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the remnant there in the province who had survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are destroyed by fire. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned 4 days, and I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven." Every rebuilding project must start with a burden. It must weigh heavy on you for you to be able to take the steps that are needed. I want to read Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 1 to 2. The Bible says, "In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, I took up," and this is Nehemiah saying, "I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been sad in his presence. And the king said to me, 'Why is your face sad, seeing you are not sick? This is nothing but sadness of heart.' Then I was very much afraid I say to the king, let the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad when the city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? This was, remember, the Bible says Nehemiah had never been sad in front of the king. Now, if you understand what Nehemiah was doing, or he was a cupbearer, that is just fascinating in itself, that he had never been seen sad. He had never been seen mad. This is not who he was known to be. Anyhow, let me leave that alone. So the message that Nehemiah was given weighed very heavily on him. It is actually difficult to rebuild something that is broken when something is not weighing heavy on you. If you do not feel the broken thing, whatever it is, be it friendships, relationship, marriage, if you don't feel it as if it is a load on you, then it is difficult to take the actions necessary to rebuild. Which leads me to my next point. Number 2, rebuilding needs prayer and sometimes fasting. In Nehemiah 1 verse 4, and I've read this, the Bible says, as soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days, and I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. Now, if you go to verse 5 to 11, you can see the prayer that he prayed, but that prayer is too long for me to read in this short video, and there's a lot in that prayer that is so good when he was praying. But I'll just say 4 things. Number 1, his prayer showed that he cared, and it also showed that he was prayerful. It also showed that he knew God's promises, and it showed that he had faith. Okay, that was a prayer. Number 3, now before I go to number 3, let me say this. It is important to pray because the enemy fights the rebuilding process. Listen, the enemy's MO is kill, steal, and destroy. If he has destroyed something, can you imagine the testimony that there is of rebuilding? Doesn't mean building doesn't have a testimony when you build something, but even rebuilding has its own testimony. It not only glorifies God, because really in a rebuilding process only God can really help you, but it encourages others who look at their whatever it is that it's gone, like it cannot be rebuilt, can never be, nothing can ever happen, but it encourages others, and in a sense also glorifies God when they also take a stand to do what needs to be done. So rebuilding will take God's help, direction, and intervention. Your dependence on him is very important. Number 3, rebuilding needs a plan. Nehemiah 2, verse 12 to 16. Then I arose in the night, I and a few men with me, and I told no one what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There was no animal with me but the one on which I rode. I went out by night by the valley gate to the dragon spring and to the dung gate, and I inspected the walls of Jerusalem that were broken down and its gates that had been destroyed by fire. Then I went on to the fountain gate and to the king's pool, but there was no room for the animal that was under me to pass. Then I went up in the night by the valley and inspected the wall, and I turned back and entered the valley gate, and so returned. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing. And I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, and the rest who were to do the work. Now there's a lot in there to talk about, but I will just say a few points. Number 1, evaluate the problem. See how bad the situation is. That's what he was doing. Number 2, come up with a plan. And that's a lot of what is going to be happening in the book of Nehemiah, which I cannot cover here. And number 3, be careful who you tell your plans to. Some people are going to sabotage you. It is a given. Some people are going to sabotage you. Be very careful who you tell your plans to. All right? But that's in the book of Nehemiah. I'll cover it at some point. Number 4, through the process, be patient and persistent. In Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 15, the Bible states, so the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month Elul, or Elul, in 52 days. In 52 days, the wall was rebuilt. Okay, this was a process which it is a process which is hard for me to talk about in this video because I'd be rushing, which I don't want to do. I will deal with it later, or I'll teach on it later. But the wall was finished in 52 days. So let me encourage you, depend on God. He will help you overcome. He will be with you every step of the way. Focus, be patient and persistent. Persistent. Have faith in God. God is faithful. God's not going to let you over there. You do your rebuilding. Me, I'm seated right here watching you. God is always there. Bible says, never will he leave you, never will he forsake you. I hope this message teaches you and encourages you. Let me recap. Number 1, rebuilding starts with a burden. Number 2, rebuilding needs prayer and sometimes fasting. Number 3, rebuilding needs a plan. And number 4, through the process of rebuilding, be patient and persistent. This message has surely taught me and encouraged me, and I hope it's done the same thing for you. I thank you for taking the time to listen to me. This has been Martha Masharia, and until next time, God bless.